honor on behalf of PriFest to welcome you to this panel discussion. Let me start by introducing our honorary guests. Mirjana Karanovic, actress, screenwriter, film director and human rights activist from Serbia, considered one of the best Serbian and Yugoslavian actresses of all time. She is probably the best known for her performance in her debut film Petria's Wreath, as well as for her frequent collaborations with film directors Emir Kusturica, Jasmila Zabanic. Yes. Mirjana received international acclaim and nomination for European Film Award for Best Actress for her role in Jasmila's Verbavica. Her acclaimed director debut, The Good Wife, had its world premiere at the 2016 Sundance Film Festival. Ambassador Jan Bratu of Norway is the head of the OSCE mission in Kosovo. Before taking up this post, he was ambassador to Bosnia and Herzegovina. The ambassador has extensive experience and knowledge of the Balkans. He holds a PhD degree in political science from the University of Oslo. Dasted Palaska is an attorney at law in Pristina. He's a graduate of the University of Pristina Law School and has completed his postgraduate studies at the Yale Law School in the United States. Mr. Paleska was a member of the expert working group that drafted the commentary on the Kosovo Criminal Procedure Code and was instrumental in establishing Kosovo's first legal clinic in the University of Pristina, where he is also assistant professor. Finally, I'd like to welcome Mr. Paul Haggis, screenwriter, director, producer, and human rights activist. He has traveled all the way from New York to be with us tonight. Paul is the first screenwriter to write two Best Film Oscar winners back-to-back, $1 Million Baby in 2004 and Crash in 2005, for which he also won an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. In 2006, Paul wrote the screenplays for Clint Eastwood's Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima, the latter earning him his third screenplay Oscar nomination. In 2007, he wrote, directed and produced In the Valley of Elah, starring Tommy Lee Jones, Charlize Theron, and Susan Sarandon. Currently, Paul is co-directing a feature-length documentary on the AIDS crisis in San Francisco called Ward 5B. He is the founder of Artists for Peace and Justice that sponsors schools, an orphanage, and children's hospitals in the slums of Haiti. He is co-founder of Brand Aid Foundation and Brand Aid Project, which markets the work of artisans from the poorest countries in the world. He is on the boards of numerous organizations supporting peace and justice initiatives around the world. And he also fundraises for numerous wildlife, environmental, human rights groups. He's a member and supporter of Death Penalty Focus and has won numerous awards for his outspoken support of civil and human rights issues worldwide. Missing from our panel is the award-winning South African director of Shepherds and Butchers, Oliver Schmidt. Although Oliver was raised in South Africa and continues to make films about South Africa, he has lived in Germany since the early 1990s, where he enjoys a successful career as a television director. Unfortunately, he's filming right now, and he sends his sincerest apologies for not being here tonight. Today is Nelson Mandela Day in South Africa. Throughout today, South Africans will stop what they're doing and spend 67 minutes engaging in a good act in their community in memory of our great leader. Nelson Mandela, at his treason trial on the 20th of April in 1964, said, "During my lifetime, I have dedicated myself to the struggle of the African people. I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to see realized. But if needs be, my Lord, it is an ideal for which I am ready to die. The year before, Mandela was charged by the state with 221 acts of sabotage designed to foment violent revolution. Under the new Suppression of Communism Act, he faced the death penalty, but at the conclusion of the trial, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. It would be 27 years before he would be released and to go on to become president of South Africa, following the first democratic multiracial elections in 1994. It is hard to imagine what could have happened to South Africa if he'd been sentenced to death. During his incarceration on Robben Island, he came to symbolize South Africans' resistance to racial oppression and acquired the moral stature to negotiate the end of apartheid and the birth of democracy without the civil war that millions of South Africans had feared as inevitable. If he'd been hanged, it would have been a very different story. And the three words that saved Mandela from the gallows were, if needs be, a suggestion from his advocate, George Bezos, when Nelson Mandela made his final plea to the judge. Oliver's film, Shepherds and Butchers, was the catalyst for this panel discussion. When I saw it in Panorama at the Berlin Film Festival last year and where it won a prize, it resonated deeply with me, and I suggested to Fatos and Viosa that they consider it for PriFest. And so we started negotiations with Oliver to screen his film, followed by a panel discussion on the death penalty. The worldview has shifted hugely since we started talking to Oliver last February. Almost out of the blue, we see a surge in right-wing populism, and along with it, an alarming loss of empathy towards human rights. We also see that citizens are calling for their government to reinstate the death penalty. Oliver said that it would never be his intention to make a polemic film. Rather, he hoped his film would contribute to the emotional experience of the complexities of the issue. He has also said he is not an anti-capital punishment activist. He feels strongly about the subject, but his reason for making the film is a more complex one. Would you say that he has achieved his objective? Paul?
I was fortunate enough to watch it this afternoon. It's a stunningly good film, and a very difficult film to watch, a haunting. The images are still in my head. I'm not sure how soon they will leave, probably not soon. And I think, as he said, a very complex one. He took on a very difficult subject. As a filmmaker, many people often try to find an easy way to tell a story like that. They find a sympathetic protagonist and obvious villains. And in here, the character was in fact sympathetic. He's a man who had brutally murdered 7 men, and he's white and all of them are black. That I think was incredibly challenging, and also because it focused truly on the issue. And that is not so much, and in my perspective, not so much do people deserve to die for their acts. I think you can argue that they do. Some people, sure, deserve to die for their acts. But can we kill them is another question. Because in doing so, we become complicit, we become the murderers. And that's on our conscience, and that's what this film is about. And it's like, forget the horrible people who commit heinous crimes. We cannot suggest their crimes are not heinous or they are not evil or anything to do with that. That's not even an argument in my case. You can talk about how and why they became this way, etc. But truly, what does it do to us? What part of our humanity do we give up and do we sacrifice in order to kill these murderers or these rapists or whoever, these people who've done heinous acts? That forgets the fact that even in my country, many of the people who are sentenced to death do not have proper representation and are often found innocent later on. Many. So just forget that. Just say, fine, they're all guilty, and they're all did exactly what they see. Still, I don't think that what we do, we cannot escape that the destruction of our own souls for killing other human beings. And so that would be my argument. I think that was his argument as well.
Thank you. I'd like to bring the audience in at this stage, and I'd like to hear from somebody who saw the film this afternoon. Do you think that Oliver achieved what he set out to achieve? Daniel?
I think that the film does achieve, it creates an exceptional debate, and it's very forcefully put in terms of the moral dilemma. And I think the filmmakers siding with Paul in terms of the inhumanity of being able to kill and the culpability of those who do kill in the name of killing someone who killed is ridiculous. And I think that ridiculous nature of this cycle of killing is very succinctly put by the film that you showed today. Yeah.
You've seen it, David. Dustin. I told you I was going to call you David.
Don't worry.
You've seen the film.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on it?
Look, I think.
Yes, sorry.
I mean, basically, what Paul was saying. Do we become inhumans by actually, committing the murder? The debate from a legal perspective, it's a little bit different. Actually, what's the purpose of any punishment? Going to jail. It's supposed to serve to rehabilitate the damage that can be rehabilitated. So, for example, if you have a person that has made, has committed a crime, you're supposed to send them to jail so they realize that what they've done is wrong, and during that period they understand that they should not repeat that. So it's a kind of a repairable, damage. I think the death penalty comes into the picture of the justice system when you actually consider that the person is beyond repair. So that person is no longer a human being that deserves. So in that sense, I mean, this is the supposition. But the question that arises in this scene, or by actually murdering that person, we are actually stripping ourselves of our humanity. But the issue about this movie is that I'm not a big fan of most of the death penalty movies, because they actually they show scenes apart from one, the life of David Gale, which is actually another very good Hollywood movie, because they usually show how the system works. Because usually persons are actually because they sit so for such a long time in the death row that eventually they're exonerated. So and that's why they actually are not the death penalty is not carried out. Whereas so that shows that the system somehow works, which is the biggest idea of why we should remove the death penalty, is because we cannot repair a potential mistake that was done, even in the determination of a person as irreparable, basically, for through a different punishment. So what movies that the best movies about death penalty is that the margin of error is so big, and the room for repair doesn't exist, basically, is that it should be excluded entirely, from consideration. Because I think if you put the debate whether someone deserves to die for their crime, I'm afraid that if you put the debate the way I did it, I think most people would not most likely admit it publicly, but I think people would think that yes, and this is an impulse that goes back to way back. It's not a modern discussion.
Well, this brings me to the next point. Many people believe that the death penalty is one of the most flagrant human rights violations that that can never be justified. Others argue that an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth is the only way to protect the vulnerable and to deter people from committing violent crimes. Of the 32 men who were hanged in Oliver's film, the fact is that most were convicted murderers. Butchers is a powerful indictment of capital punishment, but when we learn more about the men who were hanged, for example, one of the crimes was a 4-year-old child was raped and murdered. In another case, a young woman was gang raped and locked in the boot of a car which is set alight. Another man is tortured just for his car, killed for his car, and some household cutlery. When we learn more about the men who are hanged, do we not feel a shift in our sympathy for them? Do we not find ourselves so stirred by revulsion and outrage that we feel they deserve the death penalty? Ambassador?
Well, I haven't seen the film, but I'd like to make some comments based on first of all, my official position. Because the OSCE has a very strong commitment against capital punishment. And capital punishment has been abolished in all European countries, with the exception of Belarus. Even the Russian Federation has indefinitely suspended capital punishment. So this discussion is not a European discussion. This is a discussion which is maybe South African, maybe United States of America. So that's one point I'd like to make. But it doesn't mean that this battle is won once and for all. There is now, as you know, a discussion going on in Turkey, which happens to be one of the 57 participating states of the OSCE. A discussion going on in Turkey on the reinstatement of capital punishment. And it has us, many of us at least, quite worried, because we can kind of see the contours of where this is going. And it might not be for horrific crimes such as the ones that you mentioned. And that's another aspect of capital punishment. It's not always used, or it might not always be used for such crimes. It can be used for other types of crimes, political, which are not crimes, I would say, for political acts of opposition. Also coming back to what Dusty said, and also Paul, are we certain that this person actually committed the crime? Now, it's easier maybe in film to present something as a certitude, but in actual fact, in real life, that's much more difficult. And there are a myriad of cases from the United States where people have been sitting, rotting in death row for 30, 40 years, only to be exonerated in the end because they were set up. Bob Dylan has a nice song about this, Hurricane. So that's another thing. And as Dustin was mentioning, what is the purpose? Is the purpose purely retribution? If the purpose is purely retribution, what does it say about us? What does it do to us? And now I'm back at Paul's point, which I think is, for me at least, a very important point. What does it do to us as human beings if we only want revenge? It's a question I don't have. Personally, I have an answer, but I think this is an individual thing. But certainly the OSCE and 57 participating states of the OSCE have very strong commitment against capital punishment. It's not a discussion. Although in Turkey, it's becoming a discussion, and it might become a discussion in some countries because nothing is given once and for all, which is why I believe that human rights is something that we have to work with, support, protect on a daily basis. And it begins with us. It doesn't begin with the state, it begins with us, because somehow we are the state. This is, in 1990, in the OSCE at the time, actually it wasn't the OSCE in 1990, it was the Conference for Security and Cooperation in Europe, because the OSCE grew out of a conference that never ended. And in 1990, there was the Paris document, which said, the participating states agreed, that they declared their respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms to be irrevocable. That's quite idealistic, and I don't think it's true. I think human rights is something that has to be protected daily. It begins with us. And I think that's, for me, the key point. It is human rights are never once and for all. They have to be fought for every day. Even in countries such as Norway, what people think is a pretty good place, but even there. And that brings me to a case in point. In 2011, July 2011, there was a young man who shot, I think, 69 people, mostly kids. He hunted them down and he killed them in cold blood, all the while listening to some specific music. He's now in jail, and we've had this discussion in Norway. What do we do with this guy? We don't have capital punishment. He will be incarcerated for the rest of his life, but he does have certain rights as a human being. It's a very difficult discussion, but even the parents of some of the kids who were killed would not stand up and support capital punishment. So maybe that's specific for the society that I come from and am part of, but I don't think so. I think it's a very human reaction. Can this person be rehabilitated? Very doubtful. In fact, we now have the situation that his guards have to be changed on a regular basis because the psychological pressure that he exerts on them is so great that even the prison guards need to be kind of rehabilitated. So this is a person, and I don't want to use the word evil, but it springs to mind, who I don't think can ever be rehabilitated, but that doesn't mean that we should kill him. That makes us killers. And I don't want to be part of a society of killers.
Thank you. Interestingly, polls that were conducted in Britain recently indicate that 71% of Leave voters are keen to bring back the death penalty in Britain. And I mean, one of the things that startles me, in South Africa, it was an African National Congress, it was freedom fighters, Mandela's freedom fighters, who were killed by the state. I mean, I think it goes into thousands. And last week at the ANC policy conference, the ANC Women's League asked for the reinstatement of the death penalty to be put on the table for discussion in South Africa, which for me is really shocking. But South Africa is going through a crime wave at the moment, and particularly against women and children, and women are saying we've got to do something to stop it. So, to go back to Oliver's film, the story is set in 1987 in South Africa, where white domination and suppression of the majority was at its most extreme and violent. This is the generation that the director grew up in, is the generation that I grew up in. All white South Africans were expected to obey and serve the wishes of the state. The story of shepherds and butchers is deeply personal for Oliver. His generation were conscripted to either fight incursion wars in the neighboring countries like Angola to stop the tide of communism, or to quash democratic ambitions of black South Africans at home. Some resisted. Oliver left the country. Many did not and were used as instruments of the state. How ironic that the lead character in Shepherds and Butchers tries to avoid being sent to fight Cuban and Angolan troops in Angola, but lands up in a far worse situation in the prisons department, where he becomes so dehumanized by his involvement in a killing machine that he too commits a horrible murder. Paul, you examined the dehumanizing effects of war on young American soldiers in your film, The Valley of Eli. Can you tell us a little about your views on this? Do you see the same dehumanization reflected in the central character in Shepherds and Butchers?
The debate is very complex, first of all, before I started talking about my film. And the whole idea of does one deserve to die? You mentioned some of the crimes these people committed, and do they deserve to die? And I mean, I have thought about this a lot because I've always been a big against the death penalty, protested against it. we tried in California, certainly we keep trying in other states in America to get rid of this heinous act, this cruel and unusual punishment. And yet, I am not a pacifist, even though I'm a peace activist. If I caught somebody who had killed or maimed or destroyed the life of somebody I loved, I would kill that person. If I could get my hands on them, in that moment, I have no doubt I would kill that person. And because I would get myself up and stand trial and go to prison. I'm fine, or be executed. I'm fine with that, which is strange for a man who celebrates the death penalty. But I think that as soon as a society, or if it's a different thing somehow, because if a group of us sit here and decide that we're going to kill somebody, that's dehumanizing. That, it says we give up who we are. I can understand the need for vengeance on some level. I don't condone it. I don't believe in vigilantism. I don't that. And yet, I understand it. I cannot understand the cold-blooded nature of deciding that we are morally superior and then can kill somebody else. So it's a very complex thing for me. In the Valley of Ella is a movie that talks about many of the same issues that this film talked about, not about the death penalty. But it was my second film, and it was a time when I was being offered, because I'd won the Oscars and I'd done 2 films that were, lauded. And I was being offered every big movie in Hollywood to direct, and I just said no. And because we had just, at that time, declared war. I don't know if we actually declared it. We had just invaded Iraq, and we had embarked on a war, first in Afghanistan and then in Iraq. And I think the artist has a responsibility. The artists, above all, have responsibilities, because it's always artists who lead the way, whether we like it or not. Because if we put these issues into the community, it's a poet, it's a filmmaker, it's a painter, it's somebody who puts this idea out there. And so even though the war was very, very popular at that time in America, it was just the first couple of years, starting the first year, and I was warned against doing something about it. I thanked my agents for it. I went looking for a true story. And I knew by the news reporting in America that we had taken the Iraqi people and we had dehumanized them as a lot. I knew that because every night they would count the American servicemen and women who had died, all men, I suppose. And we never even bothered to count the Iraqi dead, as if it didn't matter. Whether they were civilians or they were soldiers, whether they would never count it. I found that very shocking. But I knew that's how things go, because you have to, even in the liberal media, you have to find a reason why you don't go insane by committing violence, and we were committing violence as a country, which means I was committing violence. It was my country. And so even in the liberal media, you find ways to justify this. So I knew there was no way that I could make a film that made Americans care about what we were doing to the Iraqis at that time. No, I'm sorry, they had dark skin, they dressed funny, they talked a weird language, and their leader had a big mustache, pockmarked skin, looked like a villain. He was a villain to us because he looked like one. We didn't need to know anything further than that. So, but I was very much against the war and I wanted to do something. So I said, okay, can I make them care about their own sons? Can I do that? Because I started hearing stories about the men returning after even 6 months in Iraq and being destroyed by this. And I found a true story about a young man, a beautiful young man who'd gone off to fight, who'd enlisted right after 9/11. And his father was a military police officer, former and very proud American, And he went off to fight, to be a hero, like many of them signed up to do. And because I didn't want to tell a story about villains, I want to tell a story about heroes. And so I thought, okay, what does it do to a hero? What does it do to a good person who goes off to commit violence in the name of justice? He goes to fight a monster. And that's what we believed Saddam Hussein and his people were, monsters. Much like David went to fight Goliath. And Goliath was huge and formidable, and he'd beaten all the other folks who come against him. So these folks looked at themselves as David going to fight Goliath. I said, what does that do to that man when he gets there and finds out that he's Goliath? And they're the Davids. What does that do to a good person? And I saw these good kids coming back, and I interviewed so many of them who had been destroyed, shattered, their lives completely upended and ruined by the violence that they either perpetrated or that they saw perpetrated, what they did to others. And I interviewed so many. I remember one had come to my house, and she was my friend Patricia Folkwat, who was a wonderful documentary filmmaker, did a beautiful film on it. And she would help me meet some of these veterans. And they came, and I interviewed this one man, a young man, Hispanic. He came, he was young, he was 22, 23 years old. And he had dressed in a tie and a jacket. And he sat down and he talked about his experiences, and it was emotional, but not overly emotional. And but some of the things he'd done or seen him appropriate, and it was a beautiful conversation. And he left. And Patricia said, you know, he's living under a bridge, right? I said, no. So he can't fit back in. He can't go home. He's homeless, living under a bridge. And he got all dressed up and said to come here so that he could put on his best, suit behaviors that he would look like a homeless person. That's what was happening. So I wanted to ask that question because, again, it's not whether the villains deserve it or not. It's not whether Saddam Hussein was a heinous human being. He was a heinous human being. People say, well, he's poisoning his own people, he's gassing his own people. I say, absolutely he is. You do know we gave him that gas, right? To poison his own people. Gas. You know we gave it to them. Well, we have excuses for that, blah, blah, blah. We always have excuses and reasons. And so it's not whether they deserve it or not, it's what it does to us as human beings. And that's the same as the death penalty. What it does to us, it dehumanizes us. If I would sit here and decide who's to die and who's to live. So.
Well, I'd like to come to you, Mariana, because you also deal with the dehumanizing effects of war in your very beautiful film, The Good Wife. Will you talk to us about that? What motivated you to make that film?
2005, I saw this original footage of a crime in Srebrenica made by the member of Scorpion unit, paramilitary unit, who actually was under command of officials in Serbia, under their blessing. So they killed some civilians. Two of them was minors. And this footage is so horrible because it just was awful because it looks almost fake. First time I saw that the movie scene actually convinced me more. And it was really something I couldn't imagine it looked like really. Because those people who, these prisoners, were so quiet. Another word, quiet, not even protesting or there was no sounds, any sound. And everything was so quiet. So nature, green leaves, and everybody was just calmed down, even the murderers. you're talking about some irrelevant things about food or something. And those shots was like children's gun sound. And you can see the man is falling down dead, and you can't believe it because he went so quiet. It's not, the death is not attractive like in the movies. And it's so horrible to see this, not as a movie, but as a truth. And I couldn't stop thinking about this. And of course, my first thought, it was about the mother or family members of the victims, how they feel watching this. And then, because I'm from Serbia, those people are from Serbia, I said, okay, what I would do if this man is my husband, my brother, because they live somewhere in my country, they have families. Who are they? They are not psychopaths, they are just some people. I mean, there were psychopaths in psychos in this Bosnian war, as volunteers in that. But actually, most of them are not, just regular people. And that I started to think about. And because I knew that during the war, because I was so active in this protesting and everything, I never could believe that people are just ignorant, just said, what can we do? It's a politic. I'm just an ordinary person. I have my own worries. And actually, people are not really was involved. And so I thought, yeah, maybe this woman could be like this, because this is a kind of patriarchal society where there's a man's world and women's world. And you have an ideal relationship or marriage if you let your husband to have its own world, man's world. And I won't interrupt your world, and you don't interrupt mine. And we are in perfect harmony. And so Serbia was like this. We suffered. We, didn't have food or money or everything. It's a state robbery of millions of people, but nobody just raised a voice. And for me, my hearing was like a metaphor for this Serbia, because in my country live nice people. They are ordinary nice people. They are not, like devil's child. It's just ordinary people trying to make money, and they're nice. They're good people, but they just don't want to know. And just, like, they were silent. Good. And that's why I thought this is to be good. Because we always been told when we were a little kid, be good, especially to the female kid. Be good, don't interrupt, don't ask too many questions. Be quiet. And then you grow up in a quiet person. Don't ask too many questions, don't want to know, it's easier. So I think that the majority of the people actually just don't want to know, don't want to be involved. And question of human rights, it's always we and they. So I know in Serbia we don't see Albanians, Kosovo people, Bosnian people, Croatian as the same like us. And we always take care about our human rights, not about their human rights. And that's why we think that they deserve everything. We don't deserve to be treated bad, but they deserve because they are bad. And also, if you put this culture of revenge, and it's much easier to make revenge. It comes from the early age. In my country, in Serbia, it was some research that people justify physical punishment of the kids because, yeah, they ask for this, they want it, they challenge us to slap them. You know, you have to do this because then I achieve some peace and quiet at home, and and I solve the problem. But when this kid grow up, the chain of violence continue, and then we have a group of Serbian youngsters kill the man in Greece because they have a fight in the coffee in the evening. They kick the American guy in the head so many times and killed him. And everybody in the interviews said he was a good man. This guy who kicked this young American. And the families of these murderers said, yeah, but he was quite a nice man. And then you ask how somebody who is quiet and nice and even apologize. There's an interview with some people in this same area. Said, yeah, they are nice guys. They apologize because they spread some water of us exiting from the beach. I said, okay, how it turns to the murder. So it's so disturbing thinking about this.
Which is how you portrayed the husband in your film. I mean, your central character, the good wife, is a dutiful good wife, living the kind of life you describe. And then she discovers this tape and she sees that he has committed this appalling act. And she's now in this dilemma. Does she hand him over to the authorities? Does she just pretend it's not happening? And she does the right thing, which must have been a very shocking concept for some people to accept that.
Yeah, because we all think about this tribe way of thinking, you know, like he's one of us, you know, so it's you have to choose between to be loyal to the member of your nation, of your family, or to be loyal to some higher authority like God or, I don't know, some humanity you believe. So we all very religious, believe in this God's commandment, don't kill, but if some of us kill somebody else, you say, yeah, but we're going to protect this person. It's double standards, you know. Like, we are in the 21st century, but we still have this remains of tribal way of thinking in the prehistory, like Stone Age.
Thank you. Just to go back to South Africa briefly, I was saying earlier that the African National Congress, Women's League, has asked for a debate on reinstating the death penalty. And recently there was a survey in South Africa, I think there were about 7,000 young people were interviewed about the death penalty. Did they want the death penalty reinstated in South Africa? And 71% said they did. Young people. So it seems to me that young people in South Africa certainly have lost faith in the democratic process. And I wanted to ask you, Dave, this. Please maybe David, just
Trying
to
to
back.
be my nickname.
Yeah, you comment on this. Young people are the future. Is it not deeply disturbing that they are calling for the reinstatement of what many regard as an inhumane system rather than a more equitable system that embraces compassion and forgiveness? During the course of your work, have you come across a similar view amongst young people in the Balkans, especially after the tragic events in Kosovo in 1999?
Well, yeah, I mean, just to make my position clear, I'm also against the death penalty, but because it doesn't work, basically, because the margin of error is so big that you can actually harm innocent people. And this brings me to the actual, core of this issue: are we murderers or not? I actually think, and I have the liberty to speak my mind because I'm just a private citizen. I think we all are, as Paul just mentioned. We all have a trigger that would make us kill somebody. What would make us killers that are supposed to either go to jail or be killed then is whether we kill someone for the right reasons or for the wrong reasons. Why should, for example, if we take self-defense, which is another form of legitimate violence, we take someone's life, and it's so the law excludes us from liability in cases when we make a snap decision in the midst of an attack, instrument of violence. And this goes to this thing: are we killing for the right reasons? And I did a small focus group with a couple of friends of mine from all over the world, mostly Western democracies, basically who've not had a criminal record, have never harmed anyone in their life, etc. And what I've showed them, I mean, I lied to them actually. This was the purpose of my thesis. I lied to them, so I showed them a photo of an angelic 4-year-old child, blonde hair, blue eyes, innocent look and everything. And then I found the photo of another person who looked like a criminal, but actually had no criminal record whatsoever. And I told them that this male person actually raped for a couple of days this young, boy, and then murdered, massacred him. And I said, like, how would you sentence this person? I gave him a couple of options: 20 years, 40 years, life imprisonment, death penalty, and other. And this other was just to explore. I was not expecting too many answers. Other. 80% of those of the people in the focus group chose other. When I asked them what, they would say, like, I want to kill him personally. So it's not, I don't want to do the state or the tribe. Which brings us to this, to this whole debate that we legitimize violence. Why is violence, for example, in war legitimate, and not in time of peace or when it's done? So we should look at this issue, a little bit differently, because the idea comes here that the moment someone commits a crime that makes them incapable of being a human being, they pose always an imminent and present threat to all of us. So it's basically like a self-defense, a permanent self-defense, because the moment they cross the border of their humanity, they're actually no longer shielded by the laws of humanity. This is the assumption. I'm just bringing the other side to the discussion. And the same goes. In Kosovo, for example. When the war started in Kosovo, because Kosovo and Croatia are the best examples on how this propaganda to dehumanize the victim, but that's a lie actually. Now they use propaganda to dehumanize the victim, and it goes back even to Paul's film, because the only reason why those young Americans were so desperate is that they actually found out they're not the David. If they thought that they're the David fighting the Goliath, they would have been actually felt righteous, and doing the good thing, even if they were committing murders, even if they were killed, because they were killing the Goliath. But when you come to the realization that actually, you are the Goliath, that's when you break down. That's when when you become when you're no longer a human being, which is this test of, and that's when you feel, the way you feel and not deserving of being called a human being. So I think the test, the example in Kosovo, for example, that when the Serbs started the propaganda, they had a really funny propaganda. They were not sufficient to call Albanians, primitive, sexual deviance, murders, thugs, and they would basically tell them they're not only raping Serbian women, but they're raping 90-year-old Serbian nuns. So they, I mean, it's like a special deviance, sexual deviance. It's not. So the violence against them is legitimized in advance. So that everyone who commits an act of violence against such a deviant is actually detained automatically, and they're shielded culturally, legally, and otherwise, because a deviant like that presents always a permanent danger. And of course, you would then suffer from the same principle after the war, because then Albanians thought that all of the Serbs or Goliaths. So any act against any of them is legitimate as well. And I mean, when the debate stops about when it's right to murder someone or when it's not, it's actually not on very noble grounds, saying like it's right or it's wrong. Just saying it's not accurate, so it's not working. That's how actually most of the societies have developed. I mean, if you look at the history of administration of justice, I mean, one of the original forms was duels, because the strongest would survive. And I think, but they've been eliminated not because they were necessarily wrong or they were perceived as wrong at the time when they were eliminated, but just because they didn't work. They didn't actually provide a satisfactory result to achieve this premise, which I maintain still exists today. When it's right, when it's right to murder someone, and when it's not right. So acts of war, self-defense. And other people that are just simply irreparable. Because what is the purpose of justice? Ultimately restitution. As long as the victim exists, the focus is on the victim, to give the victim the justice. But for some crimes, actually, there are no victims that survive. And this person can never be rehabilitated to come to a state, to not be a threat to someone else. So that's why then the focus is the perpetrator, or its extension from this book.
Okay, now I want to talk about populism. Europe has witnessed the rise of populist parties at both ends of the political spectrum. Since the onset of the refugee crisis, right-wing populist groupings have been gaining momentum. Scholars have come up with countless theories to help explain the success of these groups. Explanations include so-called grievance theories, which suggest that broad changes in the international environment, such as immigration and globalization, can generate insecurity and dissatisfaction with mainstream politics. An environment of discontent generates fertile soil for right-wing populists, as they present themselves as a refreshing alternative to mainstream parties. Claiming to speak for the people, they treat human rights as an impediment to their conception of the majority will. They scapegoat refugees, women, immigrant communities and minorities. Nativism, xenophobia, racism and Islamophobia are on the rise. Truth is a frequent casualty. We see these dangerous trends threaten to reverse the accomplishments of the modern human rights movement. Human rights exist to protect people, and you touched on this earlier, exist to protect people from government abuse and neglect. Yet today we see a new generation of right-wing populists attempting to turn human rights on its head. Can I ask the panel if they think a new campaign is needed to remind people of their humanity? Would you say a reaffirmation of human rights is urgently needed? Ambassador, would you start?
Oh, thank you. As I said, I think human rights, respect for each other, is something that we have to work on, each of us, on a daily basis. It's not something that's achieved once and for all. So for me, it's not a question of a new campaign, it's a question of a continuing campaign, and to uphold the principles that actually we struggled for throughout the 1970s. The OSCE is a product of that struggle. It's a struggle between the East and the West. Human rights that were being systematically flouted and in the Soviet bloc, the Eastern Bloc. That was what this was all about at the time. And it wasn't right-wing, by the way, it was left-wing. And I also, actually, Norwegian campuses in the 1970s were dominated by Marxist-Leninists. And they would gladly have killed those of us who didn't belong to or believe in them, because they felt that they believed deeply that they were right and everyone else was wrong. And I think that is, for me, the most dangerous development, when people lose their sense of a little humility, lose their sense of maybe not being certain. I mean, exaggerated certitude is a dangerous thing. I think we have to be willing to accept and to question and to accept that we don't know everything, to try to learn from others. I think it's a basic humility that we need to nurture in our children and in ourselves. And no matter how much education we have, and I've met a lot of stupid PhDs in my lifetime, you know, it's a question of what do we have inside ourselves. That's what I think, and we have to work on that every day. And I don't want to use any, you know, is it a campaign? Yes, it's a personal campaign. It's something that we have to work with. Can I just make one comment about this? We were talking about dehumanization. It's very important. I spent more years than you want to know in the army. And one of the things that we do when new recruits come in is we try to break them down psychologically. These are our own people, by the way. We break them down psychologically in order to form them into a group, into a unit that will react as a unit, not as individuals. We don't want individuals. We want people who work as a unit and who will follow orders and who will know what to do and when to do it. And when you come to killing, there's been a lot of discussion here about wanting to kill and things like this. I think wanting to kill may be easier than actually doing it. And the first kill is probably the most difficult. After that, it probably becomes a lot easier. That's what our studies tell us. There's a lot of studies that have been done on how men react, and mostly it's men, it's changing now, how men react in combat situations. We know a lot about it. Most men are scared shitless, and that's a sound reaction. And most men, according to these studies, do not even aim when they're shooting. They just shoot. Now we're talking about heavy combat operations. People are scared. That's the reality. And to stand next to another person and to pull the trigger, that's something that most of us find extremely difficult. So I think that we have built in ourselves some kind of blocks. And it raises also the question, the debate at least that was raging in the 70s, when I was young, or younger. What is the nature of man? Is man inherently evil? Or is man inherently good? I remember that my left-wing friends used to claim that man was inherently good. Anyway, so that's another debate. But dehumanization is very important. And I grew up in the time of the Vietnam War. And how did you get young American boys to commit crimes, because I believe they were crimes, at that time? No, you dehumanized the enemy. These were not human beings, these Vietnamese, they were gooks. And what did you do with gooks? You greased them, you killed them. And those guys who came back, huge traumas, and they weren't really accepted by American society. Now the Iraqi veterans are coming back and they're discovering some of the same thing. We're getting Afghani or veterans, Norwegians now, who've been in Afghanistan. They're also having reactions because this is normal. When I was working in Bosnia and Herzegovina, I heard many stories from Republika Srpska of men in their 40s. This was now in around 2006 when I was there, who had huge psychological problems. Psychological trauma is a very widespread ailment in the Republika Srpska, as I believe it is in Serbia, because once upon a time, the Serbian Minister of Interior asked the Norwegian government to help them with some psychological treatment for some of their people. Why? Because they've done terrible things and they know it. When do war veterans break down psychologically? we know a lot about this as well. Not when they're young. It usually comes 30, 40 years later. Norwegians who fought in the Second World War, they usually, most of them broke down in their 60s. They became complete vegetables. This is what happens to people who kill. So when we dehumanize others, we're actually dehumanizing ourselves. And we don't understand the price we're going to pay until it's too late.
I would agree with you completely. And I also want to say something about what I said earlier, about the urge to kill, which I think is very human. Like you said, the urge to kill is very human. And if you just deal with the political debate on that level, you are never going to win the argument. The urge to kill someone who deserves to kill, 79% will always say yes. If I just caught this fellow here with a camera in the act of killing someone or harming someone, I would lunge to try and kill him. But God, I would hope that my friends would stop me. I'd hope that my friends would grab me and pull me away, because 15 minutes later, I would understand. Because we need that time to think, to get away from our baser instincts, our instincts of revenge, our instincts of death. We need that just to be able to breathe and then go, okay, this man just did this, and he just harmed or killed or did terrible things to someone I love. But what will it do to me to kill that person? Because if I had succeeded in killing that person, I would have lost my soul as well. It's gone. Doesn't matter what justification I have. It's like that at war. It doesn't matter that you're on the right side of the wrong. You will lose your soul.
I just want to say about the discussion of that our instinct is to kill. I'm not thinking it with the film because I didn't watch it, but just generally, I can speak for myself. I come from Kosovo. I believe that our natural instinct is to love, like I'm 100% sure. Our natural instinct is compassion. Our natural instinct is empathy. And I can not only speak about myself, but I come from a family which, I was born here, so since I can remember myself, I protested peacefully. My grandfather was in jail for 5 years. I'm getting a bit emotional. And still after jail, he still continued protesting peacefully. I think the world today is in a better position than it ever was with speaking about how many people, who kills who. I think the consciousness level of this world is higher than it ever was, because when we're born, we're like that. We're love, we love, and we always want to go there, but on the way, when we feel helpless and hopeless and powerless, we think that by killing we will become a bit stronger, but it's just a short solution. So I personally, I just wanted to express what I believe and how we were raised in an extreme place with like protesting peacefully. I remember I was 10, holding a candle. My parents weren't going to kill people, even though we were suppressed and killed, and many of my family members or people, everyone here. So by just saying that, I just heard myself what I said. So even though we went through all of that, we are proof that our natural instinct is to love. That's all I wanted to share. Thank you.
I think those are the better angels of our souls. And I think that it's like you were saying earlier, it's an incredibly strong story. For a couple of reasons, but yes, that, and when you beat that child, and when you hurt that child, and when you teach that child violence, that goes into the darker instincts of that little snake brain of ours. But I think there's something very, very important that you have proven by who you are and by your work and by Elizabeth, especially you, is that we talk about what the commitment to human rights, the commitment for all we have, and that's great. I've been committed for years, and when it was unpopular, I was committed. When it was popular, I was committed. It just always been there, and I was lucky enough to meet Nelson Mandela when we first started. But all those things are great. But where it comes down to is a very personal level and a personal choice. And I think what you did is so remarkable, and almost no one does. It's very easy to tell a story about bad people who did bad things to people who are good, and perhaps people you loved or people you can empathize with. That's a very easy story to tell, and it's a story that's told many, many times. Much harder to look at yourself, your people, what you love, and do that. And if we all did what you did, if Americans only looked at Americans, we didn't villainize anybody else, what are we doing?
And we still have the same problem, how to be better person. And we are thinking in our personal lives, and also the states and societies think about the global side. So I think that the changes should go in the direction that we should accept the fact that you can't fix somebody permanently. I mean, that you should accept that there is a dark side and the bright side of any, and that we should more talk about this. I saw the wonderful show in some television when the relatives of the victims, mothers or sisters, talk to the murderers, and it's a process. When finally those people who are, evil minds start crying and to feel bad because what they did. And that's the only way. For me, it's the only way, if it's possible. So that penalties just fix things for this moment. Like mother who is angry, or parent angry on the child and just severely spank the child, and the child is frightened and quiet for some times, but after this child could be next murderer. So it's a circle, it's a vicious circle. And also Kosovo and Montenegro, it's in Albania. This is in the past it was much. It was a custom that society protect itself by making revenge. Like this blood but it was normal thing. If somebody, or in Italy, somebody killed somebody of yours, you kill somebody of them, and it's horrible thing. But now people start talking and start resolving this dispute with talking, looking to each other, and then say, okay, we won't continue with this. We make peace, and it won't be any killing anymore. So I think that's how it should be in the future. Just make different kind of punishment or something, different kind of process to fix things.
Well, I'm a great believer in the truth and reconciliation process, and that's Nelson Mandela, because he was very clear. There are no white South Africans, there are no black South Africans, there are just South Africans.
Sure, can I start with a question?
Yeah.
I don't quite know how to articulate this, but bring it back to the film that we watched, in terms of the wider culpability of society for horrendous things that happen. And Mariana, bringing it back to what I understood from what you said in terms of many good people in Serbia allowing things to happen because they weren't aware of them, or they were good people, but somehow they didn't intervene, because in the same way that many of us don't intervene in bad things we know are happening around the world or even in our own neighborhoods. And I was wondering, because in a way, when something very extreme happened in Germany, an international community said, okay, look, you have to pay reparations, you can't have a military. And then even the Germans that weren't culpable, even the good people that did nothing, had to pay, because their whole society had to pay. So I think it's interesting, when good people do nothing, when do they become bad people, potentially? Because as you're saying, we all have this.
The moment they do nothing.
Pardon?
The moment they do nothing.
The moment they do nothing. And so those people in Serbia that are good people that did nothing when these things were going on, what do you think in terms of Serbia as a whole having to deal with its past by having to do things like, as a collective, having to accept what happened and having to have some kind of punishment for this as a collective, as opposed to just, these were the bad people, but as a nation to start accepting this? And would that somehow help a catharsis, and through accepting it, change potentially for the future, instead of continuing this cycle of behavior?
Could I just speak on behalf of Serbia? Because it probably goes for 2 seconds to say, it's just simply this. I think, yes, we cannot forgive. Or maybe we can forgive, but we cannot excuse what many did. But I think, by way of example, it's the most difficult thing is to do what I suggested you do, or we all do, is look at ourselves first. Hold ourselves accountable first. And by example, others may do the same. It's like you're in a relationship and you have a big fight, right? And you know she's crazy, and she knows you are terrible in that moment. The only way to solve this problem is for you to stop for a second, knowing you're completely right, and look at it from her point of view and go, yeah, I was being an asshole. Not, yes, I was being an asshole, but you did this, 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 and this, and you were worse than me. No. The only way to get through it is to first look inside. And so for those who ask other countries to stand up and take responsibility, which they should do, the very first thing they can do is hold themselves accountable. I'm not trying to be relativist here. I do not believe that. I think there are victims and there are criminals, and I'm not trying to say they're all the same. I am honest to God not trying to say that. But if your friends, if your neighbors, if your leaders, if they also did things that were terrible, the first thing you can do is hold them accountable and say, no, we are a good society. We are a loving society. Those people can choose to do that. We don't do that. I do not murder. I do not condone murder just because they were Serbs or just because they were others. So yes, while yes, you can answer for yourself, I think the very first thing you can do is hold yourself accountable.
I think that's very true, and especially on a personal and international level.
Yes.
But I think in terms of what happened in Germany, it's an interesting example.
Yes.
Because being forced to stop having an army, being forced to pay reparations, that wasn't necessarily something they initially wanted to do, but it became so cathartic for the country that now they're a massive superpower. So
and because they benefited. But America, who has committed many, many, many fucking war crimes over the year, has never done that. Has never stood up and done that, right? And since we have not held our own country accountable, because we've excused it under many reasons, we are suffering from that.
And I believe that you will.
Excuse me, just to maybe I would just comment something. I didn't want to interrupt you, but maybe speaking exactly about this, you mentioned that. Thank you for the discussion, by the way. But you mentioned that it's an individual thing to sort of hold someone accountable. But I disagree. Actually, I think, and being German, this is maybe a specific perspective. But I don't think it was like one individual, like each and every individual German deciding we would like to kill a whole people, but I think it's a sort of construct that is sort of, it's a societal process, and this is very much guided by politics and the society as a whole. And so I think it's not, I think it's rarely the answer to like ask every individual to do something, but rather as a society to find a process, and civil society is a strong factor in that, to sort of start a reflection not only about the past, but also about the future. There's this Holocaust monument in Berlin, where I'm from, which maybe some of you have visited, and there's an exhibition below it.
Yes, and you don't have to quote every single person, but you better, if you want someone else to do something, because you better look into your own heart first before you demand others. And it's just a very Christian way of saying things. Those who should, live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, which I'm sure is Judaic, which is sure is Muslim. It's the same thing we all say. You have to look at yourself before you accuse others.
No, I agree. The thing I just wanted to point out was that there can always be the other that can either be you or be somebody else. And me, being a white blonde girl, it was rarely me, the other.
Yes.
And so that's an important reflection point, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I just think that there is a personal responsibility. This is not a criminal responsibility. But I think if we succeed to develop this kind of personal, what I haven't done or what I could have been done in this time, because many people are led by the feeling of fear and insecurity, but we have to learn from our past. If we don't learn, we are lost persons. So that's and answering your question, when it's going to happen in Serbia, I don't know. I really don't know, especially because I don't think that it's quite exact. Oh my God, the words. Comparing Germans and Serbs. And I tell you why. Because during the war, this is the thing I remember when changed my perspective for good. I saw at the Belgrade state television, Serbian television, the close footage of murdered Serbs in Bosnian village. And they are slaughtered by some group of, I don't know who, some enemies. And they filmed their, in close-ups, their broken heads and slaughtered, and I saw propaganda in this. I saw happiness in that act, that now we have our victims. It was like a flag. It was like we now have to show why we are fighting for. And it was so disgusting. I felt so bad because those poor people are used for somebody else's purposes and propaganda. And that's how so many dead people, civilians, are used. And the other side, civilians are never mentioned. In Serbia, the majority of people don't know what kind of crime Serbian police forces did on Kosovo. They don't even have a clue how horrible it is. Bosnia was horrible, and Kosovo is nothing. I mean, Bosnia is nothing comparing to Kosovo, and we don't know this, and it's a terrible thing. But that's the thing. I feel it should be changed, and I agree with in this region we all have something to question. our goals, I mean, not our, but the goals we are agreed to be part of as a member of some society, nation, or to be quiet and watch what they're doing in our names. And even if we are followers, we have to question this. Me as an artist and a human being, I have to question this. I can't belong to something just because this is my people, because this is something you can't trade with. So I know that I'm one of my minorities in my country and minorities in everywhere, but this is the only way I can be, and this is the only way for some people in my country. And this is, I think that for minorities we have some major achievements of humanity. Yeah.
Sure.
So,
Thank you so much
Sure.
for such an incredible answer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sure, just to,
Yes,
you know,
just
pick up on this.
final.
So much was said that I didn't intend to close this
Yeah.
debate, but since I was waiting for my turn. I mean, just observe what we all have been talking about, and let me, doing my lawyer thing, rephrase a lot of stuff. Basically, even why does propaganda like that work? Because now, people in Serbia, they don't think they started this whole thing. Like in Germany, there was a clear-cut determination. This is the guilty party, so you need to look at yourself, make sure you never repeat this ever, which they haven't. And now in Serbia with propaganda, that basically, okay, there were crimes on the other side as well, so it's like we're all kind of a bad, so we're not sure who's actually the good and the bad. This will continue. This will continue. Now that's, you know, because now the debate, which is also fed by, you know, an attempt by an international community now to balance out a little bit. I mean, for God's sake, Vučić is now kind of, you know, hope for the future. The guy said we'll kill 1,000, you know, Bosnians for every Serb that is killed in the parliament, wearing a short sleeve, you know, ugly shirt. But basically now he's this attempt to balance it out. Now everyone is guilty, and that's why so the punishment is bad. In Germany, you just actually proved what I was saying. Because the punishment worked, the person, now in this case the state, was rehabilitated. Here the criminals will not be rehabilitated because they did not receive the adequate punishment. And some of them are beyond. Going back to Orta, I definitely agree. Human beings, and I mentioned this intentionally, human beings, the primary instinct is love. Human beings never hurt another human being. What does this mean? They hurt other forms of life which are not human beings. Animals, for God's sake, to begin with. Why do we kill like an innocent animal in the middle of the forest? Because it's not a human being. We are threatened by that. So human beings, they use violence to protect themselves from other living forms that are not human beings. So the question about the death penalty, when do we kill, when it's right, I still maintain it's right when we are convinced that that person that is receiving violence is basically not a human being, A, and B, when actually that determination, which comes as a full realization in a moment of basic instinct, when you see something happening, it remains like that. So if you're convinced that actually that was the Goliath, ultimately, you will not receive the actual human trauma that you received after the facts. Look at the movie, going back, finishing on the movie. What is the guy pleading? The guy saying, it's not me, it's the system that made me a murderer. I'm a human being, I'm an innocent person. They try to, to shift the dynamics. If he was just saying, I'm a person, I like to kill, I will continue to kill. Every time I have an opportunity to kill, I think even if we do a vote here, everyone would like to kill that person as soon as possible.
Yes.
So, because we are convinced that person is no human being, he has no chance of becoming a human being. And to conclude, through the reconciliation commission worked just for one reason, by an apology. By crime, those people gave signs of humanity. It was like, I'm a human being. So please welcome, can you please welcome me back to the club?
Yes.
And you said, okay, yeah, come back, we'll work with you. But if they said, I enjoyed killing you, no, it wouldn't work. So that's why we kill legally.
Thank you so much.